It is minus 40 degrees outside. The wind is ripping across frozen tundra snow, is hammering everything in sight. And inside that metal shell, that curved, corrugated, military-grade steel dome, sitting in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, it is 68 degrees. There is a fire crackling. A dog is sleeping on the floor. A man is sitting in an armchair drinking coffee. No insulation. Not a single inch of spray foam. Not one bat of fiberglass stuffed between steel ribs. Nothing. And every contractor who has ever walked onto that property and looked at what he built has said the same thing. That is impossible. That cannot work. You're going to freeze to death. He has been living there for years. This is not a story about a crazy man. This is a story about a system, a brutally simple, shockingly effective heating system that most people in the construction industry have never seen assembled this way. And by the time this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why it works, how he built it, what it costs to run, and why the contractors who laughed at him are now quietly asking questions. Let us start at the beginning. Let us start with the problem. A Quonset hut is essentially a giant tin can cut in half lengthwise and placed on the ground. The shape comes from World War II. The United States military needed structures they could ship flat, assemble fast, and leave behind without crying. They are made from corrugated galvanized steel. They are semicircular in cross-section. They are extraordinarily strong under load. They are cheap. They go up in days. And in terms of heat retention, they are catastrophic. Steel has a thermal conductivity of around 50 watts per meter per Kelvin. Fiberglass insulation sits around 0.04. That means raw steel conducts heat roughly 1,200 times faster than insulation. When it is minus 40 outside and you are sitting inside an uninsulated steel tube, that steel shell is actively stealing warmth out of the air around you at a rate that most heating systems simply cannot keep up with. The surface area of a standard Quonset hut is enormous. Every square foot of curved metal above your head is a radiator working against you. This is why every contractor, every builder, every energy auditor will tell you the same thing. Insulate first. Insulate everything. Insulate before you do anything else. Spray foam the inside of that steel shell before you even think about a heating source. The cost of spray foaming a Quonset hut properly runs between $8,000 and $25,000, depending on size. That is before you touch flooring, framing, electrical, or plumbing. For someone building off-grid in rural Alaska, that single-line item can kill a project before it starts. And even when people do insulate, they run into a problem that contractors rarely warn them about up front: condensation. When warm interior air meets cold steel, even steel with insulation pressed against it, you get moisture. Moisture inside a steel structure means rust. Rust means structural compromise. In Alaska, where the freeze-thaw cycle is violent and relentless, this is not a minor annoyance. It is a slow-motion structural disaster. Men have insulated their Quonsets perfectly, by the book, pass inspection, and return 5 years later to find the steel ribs weeping rust down the interior walls. The insulation itself traps moisture against a metal it was supposed to protect. So the man in this story looked at the problem differently. He did not ask, how do I keep heat inside? He asked, how do I generate so much heat, so efficiently, so cheaply, that the rate of loss does not matter? And the answer was sitting in a field behind an old farm 40 miles down the road. A decommissioned industrial fuel tank. Steel, cylindrical, about the size of a riding mower, free for the hauling. What he built is called an outdoor wood gasification boiler, though his version is rougher and more direct than the commercial units you can buy. The concept is not new. Farmers in Scandinavia and rural Canada have been heating barns and homes this way for decades. The principle is simple. You burn what's outside the building. You capture the heat from that combustion. You move it into the building through pipes. The fire never comes inside. The smoke never comes inside. The risk never comes inside. And because the firebox is outdoors and uncontained by square footage restrictions, you can burn much larger loads of wood than any interior with stove could legally or safely handle. His firebox is welded from 1/4-inch steel plate. The combustion chamber sits inside the repurposed tank. The tank itself acts as a water jacket, a surrounding reservoir of water that absorbs heat from the firebox walls. That hot water then travels through insulated underground pipe into Quonset, where it feeds a simple radiant system. Not forced air, not a boiler room full of complicated equipment. Radiant heat rising from a floor through a basic loop of cross-linked polyethylene tubing embedded in a thin concrete slab. Radiant floor heat is the oldest heating technology in human history. The Romans used it. They call it a hypocaust. They ran hot air under raised stone floors in bathhouses 2,000 years ago. The physics has not changed. Heat rises. Warm floors mean warm air at human height. And warm air at human height in an uninsulated building means far less waste than forced air systems that push heat to the ceiling where no one lives. Here is where it gets interesting. He also runs a secondary loop off the same outdoor boiler, a pipe that feeds a small cast iron with stove inside the Quonset near the open end. That stove is not connected to any chimney in the traditional sense. It is a heat exchanger fed by the same hot water loop, radiating warmth into the open end of the structure where the floor slab does not extend. 2 zones, 1 fire. Everything fed from outside. The outdoor firebox burns once a day in moderate Alaskan winter, meaning temperatures in the -10 to -20 range. He loads it in the morning. It burns for 8 to 10 hours on a single load of spruce and birch. He loads it again in the evening for overnight, on the coldest days, the days when it drops past -30 and the wind begins. He runs it continuously and adds a load every 6 hours. Total wood consumption per week during deep winter runs approximately 1.5 cords. 1.5 cords. That is a stack of wood 4 feet wide, 4 feet tall, and 12 feet long. Per week. That sounds like a lot. Let's put it in context. Propane in rural Alaska costs between $4 and $7 per gallon, depending on how far you are from a road. A standard propane system heating a structure the size of his Quonset, roughly 800 square feet of living space, burns through approximately 200 to 300 gallons per month during a hard Alaskan winter. At $5 a gallon, that is $1,000 to $1,500 per month. For 5 months of genuine winter, that is $5,000 to $7,000 in propane alone, every single year, assuming prices stay stable, which in rural Alaska they historically do not. His would cost him almost nothing. He is on 40 acres of boreal forest, spruce, birch, and poplar. He cuts standing dead timber, trees that died on their feet and have been air drying Alaskan coal for 1, 2, sometimes 3 years. Dry, standing deadwood has a heat value close to kiln-dried lumber. He runs a chainsaw he maintains himself. He splits by hand and with a hydraulic splitter he built from a used hydraulic pump and a truck frame section. His fuel cost, once the splitter was built, is chainsaw gas and bar oil, maybe $200 a winter, against $5,000 to $7,000 in propane. The math is not close, but the build cost matters too. Here's what he spent. The tank was free. Welding rod and consumables for firebox, about $400. The water jacket piping, fittings, and pump, around $600. Underground pipe insulation, $300. The radiant floor tubing and manifold, $700. Concrete for the slab, $800. The used cast iron radiator unit inside, found in an estate sale for $80. Total materials, somewhere around $3,000. Compare that to the $8,000 to $25,000 a proper spray foam insulation job would have cost. And his system not only heats the building, it paid for itself in fuel savings inside the first winter. Now here is something the contractors never mention when they argue for insulation. Insulation is a passive system. It does nothing. It only slows loss. His system is an active system. It generates. And in a climate like interior Alaska, the difference between passive loss reduction and active generation is the difference between staying slightly less cold and actually being warm. Insulation on a Quonset hut in -40 weather without a powerful heat source is like wearing a thin jacket in a blizzard. It helps, but it does not solve the problem. There's also a psychological element here that matters for off-grid living that nobody talks about. An outdoor wood boiler decouples your heat source from your living space. When you burn inside a structure, you are managing fire, ash, smoke, creosote, and a carbon monoxide risk all within the space where you sleep and eat. An outdoor system removes all of that. The fire is outside. The risk is outside. The mess is outside. Inside the Quonset, it is clean. It is quiet. There is no crackle unless he wants one. There is no smoke smell unless the wind swings and catches him while he is loading. The indoor environment is, paradoxically, safer and cleaner than most insulated propane homes in the lower 48. The dog figured this out immediately. From the first week, the dog sleeps on the warm slab nearest the radiant loop closest to the boiler inlet, the hottest zone. Animals understand radiant heat instinctively. Humans spend decades covering their floors with carpet and forgetting that the floor itself can be a heater. The one legitimate criticism, and there is one, is labor. This system requires physical presence. It requires loading a firebox in the dark at 6 in the morning when it is minus 38 and the snow is horizontal. It requires splitting wood through autumn. It requires maintaining a pump, checking a water jacket, bleeding air from loops, watching for pipe freeze in the underground section during extreme cold snaps. It is not a set-it-and-forget-it system. It rewards attention. It punishes neglect. He has a backup, a small propane wall heater, never used for primary heating, plumbed into a 100-pound cylinder near the rear wall. If he leaves for more than 24 hours in winter, he sets the propane heater to 40 degrees, just enough to keep the radiant water loop from freezing, and shuts the outdoor boiler down. The backup has run maybe a dozen times in 3 years. He has burned through less than half of one propane cylinder in that entire period. There is also a structural advantage to not insulating that nobody talks about. The bare steel shell of a Quonset hut is inspectable. He can see every weld, every fastener, every connection point. He can run his hand along the interior curve of the steel and feel for cold spots, for rust formation, for any point of stress. An insulated Quonset hides its structure behind foam and facing. Problems develop invisibly. His structure hides nothing. And because the interior is kept dry by the radiant system, warm floors pull moisture out of the air before it can condense on the steel. He has seen zero rust development on the interior surface in 3 years. Zero. The contractors who visited and shook their heads were operating from textbook knowledge, from training that says insulate first, always, before anything else. That training is correct for most climates, most structures, most use cases. It is not correct for every situation. A man with 40 acres of free fuel, the mechanical skill to build and maintain a hydronic system, and the physical willingness to load a firebox twice a day has a fundamentally different equation than the textbook assumes. What this story is really about is the difference between a standardized solution and a contextual one. Contractors give standardized solutions because they work across a wide range of situations with low probability of failure. They are optimizing for liability, for repeatability, for customers who will not maintain their systems. He is optimizing for a specific situation: abundant fuel, physical capability, low budget, high tolerance for labor, the willingness to learn how heat actually moves through a building, through pipes, through a steel shell, through a floor, through the air above a dog sleeping in the warmth. The outdoor boiler itself took him 11 days to build and install. He has rebuilt the firebox grate twice in 3 years. It is the one component that takes direct flame contact and warps over time. Replacement cost each time about $60 in steel plate and 2 hours of welding. The pump has never failed. The underground pipe has never frozen because he ran it below the frost line, 4.5 feet down, and insulated it in 6-inch foam pipe wrap before burial. He monitors the water jacket temperature with a single analog gauge mounted on the tank. When it reads above 180 degrees Fahrenheit, the loop is hot. When it reads below 140, he adds wood. That is his entire control system. One gauge, no sensors, no Wi-Fi thermostat, no app. One gauge and the knowledge of what his building needs on any given day. There's a version of this system that could be built for even less. A salvage hot water heater tank makes a serviceable water jacket for a smaller structure. Copper pipe instead of cross-linked polyethylene runs hotter and transfers more efficiently, though it costs more. A basic circulating pump from a pool supply store runs continuously on less electricity than a light bulb. The entire system, in its most basic form, is 19th century technology assembled from salvage. It does not require permits in most rural Alaskan jurisdictions because it is classified as an outdoor appliance. It does not require a licensed contractor to install because none of the indoor components touch the electrical system. It is, by design, outside the regulatory frameworks built for conventional construction. This is what baffles the contractors, not the technology. They understand hydronic heat. What baffles them is that someone applied it this way, in this sequence, on this budget, and it works better than the $30,000 insulated and mechanically heated Quonset they would have built for him on contract. It works so that in 3 winters, the coldest interior temperature recorded inside that structure during an occupied night was 54 degrees Fahrenheit, caused by a pump issue at 3 in the morning that he diagnosed, fixed, and had resolved within 90 minutes. 54 degrees at the lowest point, in the middle of an Alaskan winter, in an uninsulated steel tube, fixed in 90 minutes by one man in the dark. The dog did not even wake up. If you are thinking about a Quonset hut or any off-grid metal structure in a cold climate, do not let the standard advice be the only advice you hear. Run the numbers for your specific situation. Look at your fuel sources. Look at your skill level. Look at what the labor actually costs you versus what the materials cost you. The textbook is a starting point. It is not a ceiling. And sometimes a man standing in a blizzard next to a repurposed tank with a fire burning inside it, his dog sitting in the snow beside him, smoke rising clean into the dark Alaskan sky. Sometimes that man has figured something out that the textbook has not caught up to yet. The heat inside that Quonset right now is 68 degrees. The wind outside is gusting to 30 miles an hour. The snow is coming sideways. The fire is loaded and burning. The floor is warm. And somewhere in a truck on a paved road 100 miles south, a contractor who once walked that property and laughed is driving home to a heated office and a standard bid sheet that does not have a line item for thinking differently.